welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight with Mayor Jeff Mims. And today I have another special guest. Of course, all my guests are special.
I thought I was the most special, though, Mayor.
Right. So, that's great. Yeah, as long as no one else is looking at this to hear me say that. So, our city manager, Shelley Dickstein, how are you?
I'm good.
Good, great. Appreciate that smile. Okay. So the aspect of having this show is giving more and more citizens just information about some of the kinds of things that are happening. Of course, we get mostly outside guests that are doing different things across the city, across the region, and they talk about their contributions and things that they're doing to improve the quality of life for people who, young and those who have in between, those who have gray hair like myself. So so today you're on. So let's talk about your role. Let's talk about your role as city manager. So what does a city manager do in the city of Dayton?
Well, the city manager is the chief administrator or the CEO of the administration, right?
Okay.
So all of those basic core services, like picking up trash, making sure that our fire crews arrive in a timely manner, that we have enough police on the streets, that we have recreation for our young at heart citizens who want to take advantage of that programming. All of those core services have to be delivered with efficiency, effectiveness, under budget.
Okay.
And then there's a lot of support behind the scenes or back office operations, right?
Okay.
So we've got finance who collects our revenue. We've got management and budget that project our revenues and our expenses and make sure that we're budgeting wisely and conservatively. And we've also then got the enterprise functions of the water department and the airport as well, which are two huge regional assets that have to be that the city manager provides oversight to. Okay. So it's quite it's almost $1 billion in budgetary impact that the city manager is responsible for at the city of Dayton.
Okay. So sometimes some of the government structures that we have across the city, across the state, they have, some have a similar arrangement, if you will. Our city is a mid-sized city, and as such, we have a strong city manager type of government. Okay, and so that works in terms of doing like what you mentioned before.
Yeah, so Dayton has a council manager form of government, which was put in place in 1914.
Okay.
John Patterson helped lead the way on that shortly after the flood, and it really was put in place over 100 years ago to try and remove the politics out of the administration, right? So that you didn't have, any kind of influence as to how services were delivered, where services were delivered. There wasn't preferential treatment based on geography. It was to remove that political pressure and potential for corruption out of the administration. So Dayton was one of the first large cities to go for that change in government. And, for the most part, the first tier cities are the ones that have the strong mayor form of government. And it serves Dayton well as a mid-sized city because we're able to do 20 and 30-year strategies.
Correct.
And it doesn't swing, with the change.
Every election.
In mayoral elections, right.
Right. Good. So I served as president of the Dayton School Board, for example. 2007, 2011, that time frame. And so we functioned at that time on a very similar basis. In fact, one of the primary things that we get training on is to do, just as you mentioned, to keep the, quote, politics from one election turned over to the next election out of the whole process in terms of how we govern. To look at things that benefit the entire scope of your responsibilities, how we together set goals and objectives. The same thing here at the city of Dayton. Commissioners come together on a retreat or a form of governing from that perspective to look at what our priorities are. And I know you're always beating us up every budget cycle, trying to get our priorities. So we're sending you our priorities,
Right.
And they're pretty basic for the most part. The same kind of things that happen in other government structures as well, in terms of what do you want to see in terms of priorities to improve the quality of life for the citizens that you
Right.
have in your city.
Right, I think, and that's a really good point, Mayor. The city manager takes direction from, a consensus from the commission, right?
Correct.
The mayor and the commission provide policy direction, and those priorities are really important because then we take that information from you that you gather out in the community, that you gather from our annual survey, that you gather from our performance metrics, and we put together the budget each year that tries to address those priorities and deliver outcomes that the commission is interested in, and so that's a really good point.
Yep. So when you start looking at goals, one of the main things that we all have responsibility for, and then we task you to take care of those activities, if you will, or functions. When we look at the financial responsibility to be responsible as commissioners collectively, and we start looking at what kind of things that we need to have that allows us to have the resources to take care of the priorities that we have balanced, that we have approved upon, if you will. So you don't tell us what to do in each of these areas.
Right.
You do have staff that are experts in their own right in housing development as well as economic development, as well as, like you mentioned, fire, you mentioned police, and all those spaces. But we do have them meet a certain set of standards, by common sense things that they do, or by standards or rules and regulations that they have to follow.
Right, right. We have, with the 2,000 employees, we have a great deal of professional employees who are experts in their field and stay abreast of best practices, trends that are informing for us with regards to delivering services, with regards to informing the commission as to shifts that we are seeing in those areas, and that the staff do the majority of the work of modeling and making sure that we are delivering services that are best in practice and within our budgetary resources.
Correct. Okay. So as you mentioned budgetary resources. So for 32 years, until 2016, the city of Dayton passed no tax renewal, no tax levy, nothing to bring any additional resources in. People say, well, whose fault was that? Okay. Well, it's the fault of the commission as a whole, because they didn't offer anything. So I'm not sure exactly why it wasn't offered before. I think probably logic and common sense says that the Economic Times did not support that. When you start looking back at the foreclosure crisis, you look at the predatory lending, you look at the redlining, of course, we look at the state of Ohio and Dayton being probably first in the nation or close to it. I know the state was first in terms of job losses. And then 49th in terms of job creation. All those things collectively put this city in a situation where those resources that normal affluent communities would have to carry on the basic rights and needs of their citizens were absent. Okay. And when we start talking about and hearing, of course, complaints, so people talk about those things when you're cutting recreation, you're cutting different things in terms of programs and processes to fix roads, streets, cut grass, and to beautify your city. Why are those things important, and why was it necessary to generate resources to carry on some of those basic things that citizens need?
Right. So, Mayor, you're referring to the fact that we never increased our income tax for 32 years. It was 2%.
Right.
And what we were looking at was significant compression with regards to income tax revenue, yet great inflation over those years of how things were costing more and more. And we had heard plenty from our citizens around the need for that our roads were in poor shape, that we had, too much blighted property throughout our community, that we had a need for our park maintenance, to upgrade our parks so that they were, because in many of our neighborhoods, those are the only assets that we have. And then, of course, there was the commission direction to invest in our youngest citizens in preschool promise, so that we would have, our children would be better prepared for kindergarten and have greater kindergarten readiness. So in order to elevate investments and have an impact on our parks and our roads and the blight in our community and preschool promise, we needed more revenue. And so that's what led us to the campaign to increase our income tax.
Right. And that was, again, 2016, and as well, the majority of that tax were paid for by people who live outside the city of Dayton because of their income as they came to Dayton. And people say, well, the city was poor, and either fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the poor people did not pay a lot relative to that tax because income tax.
It's an earned income tax, correct. Just like the older citizens who are retired didn't have to pay into that because it doesn't affect their pensions and their savings. It's an earned income.
Yeah. So I know when we did the whole program to build all new schools in Dayton, that whole $528 million package, if you will, the citizens of Dayton actually paid just 15% of that. Because the state pays 61% of the local businesses and or citizens paid the other 39%, but of that 39%, the businesses paid 60%. Okay, so again, it left the citizens with the lighter load, if you will, to get new schools for their children. So so it's interesting how those things work. So what would you say would be probably one of the biggest issues in terms of how do you attract and why do you attract business to your community?
Yeah, so economic development, I'll first say, is an art form, right? Okay. There is lots of strategies or trends. One of the first things that's really important to understand is that any community's economic growth comes from 80% of their growth comes from the existing businesses, right? So your existing businesses contribute to 80% of your economic growth because they are investing and they are growing and they are churning, and that is what really creates economic vitality. About 20% or so come from relocations or new businesses coming in. And so the lion's share of our time is spent looking at and working with our business community around, one, how can we help them make sure they have the kinds of space and the equipment and the personnel, the workforce that they need. And particularly, we do a lot of corridor asset-based strategies because businesses are also really interested in the area around their business. It impacts their ability to attract workforce and retain workforce. They don't want to have a lot of blight around them. They want to have other prosperous businesses around them because it's a stronger destination. And so we often do incorporate greater geographic strategies around our business support. When we're looking at business attraction, we are also looking at those differentiators that help us compete. Because when you are trying to attract that 20%, it's highly competitive. As an example, 15 plus years ago, we did a logistics and distribution strategy at Dayton International Airport because we recognized the value of that 70-75 corridor. Within a day's drive, and day could be defined from 8 to 10 plus hours, you can get to 60% of the U.S. population from 70-75.
Okay.
Huge value proposition. And so we went through about a year-long planning process with all of the jurisdictions around us, as well as, professional planners and the Dayton International Airport leadership and Jobs Ohio. And I mean, we pulled this all together and came up with a strategy. And that strategy is what was ultimately successful for us attracting all of that development that sits outside the fence at Dayton International Airport. So the Chewy's and Procter and Gamble and
STP and all those
right,
folks
all
like
of
that.
those
Yeah.
big box distribution, and there are almost 3,000 jobs that have been developed there that are doing really well because of that 70-75 corridor. And then, so you think about that, then all of the work that we've done at Dayton International Airport also laid the ground, because of all of that investment and that activity, for us to secure Sierra Nevada Company as well as Joby to the airport, because that all strengthened and built the momentum for Dayton International Airport to be attractive for attracting that investment.
Okay, so let's talk about Sierra Nevada. Is that a soft drink? What, Joby Aviation? Because people say you're mentioning these things and they may not be
Sure.
privy
Sure.
or up to date with what's happening with that.
So Sierra Nevada is a privately held company that is essentially competing in the defense space and won a multi-billion-dollar contract to essentially bring on the next generation of the doomsday planes. And the easiest way to describe that is if the United States is under attack from nuclear or some kind of major catastrophe that you can see in the movies a lot of times, the doomsday planes take the federal leadership, the president and his cabinet and leadership, up into the sky and operate from the sky as if it's a White House, right? They have telecoms, and they have the ability for, accessing international news and collaborating, coordinating, negotiating, all of that up in the skies. And so that is a multi-year project that Sierra Nevada has already built 4 hangars and are in the process of creating several more.
I think at least 2 more, right?
2 more, and then a world-class painting facility that will not just service SNC customers. They will actually be able to contract that out and bring in others to utilize this paint facility for planes. Right. So huge, multi-billion dollars of investment and opportunities for, again, over 2,000 employees to be working there at the airport, generating income tax.
Yeah, I know with the first one, I think it was $38 million maybe, and I think the costs wind up increasing because by the time they got finished, inflation and all the kind of things associated with that. So the average has been approximately $50 million each one of those hangars that they
because
built.
These hangars are not only huge structures, because 747s have to be able to fit into them, multiple planes fit in them, but they're also
so like 4 or 5 planes in each one of those.
And they're also very built with great flexibility in mind with regards to cranes and power and all of that, because that way they can respond to whatever customer comes that they have to service.
Okay. So Joby Aviation is there as well. So about the top, you have $500 million, okay, 2,000 jobs. Yeah, again, similar to Sierra Nevada, creating more and more jobs and opportunities for the citizens that we have in Dayton. So what's the connect? What's the connect from the airport with Joby Aviation, for example, Sierra Nevada, even if you can go back to On Main, the project over there by the old Montgomery County Fairgrounds, that whole space over there between UD and Stewart Street. So what's the connect? What's the benefit to the citizens that we have in the city of Dayton because of those large those very large institutions
Right.
that have come to Dayton.
Well, and again, through the asset-based strategy, right, we are working with partners, first of all, that recognize the value of a particular location or site. For the Dayton citizens, there are two reasons why we do economic development. One is to generate income tax so that we can continue to provide services throughout the city, throughout the 52 square miles the city is in, so all neighborhoods. But secondly is for job attraction. And as an example, the P&G facility that sits out in Union, right by the airport, at one time when we looked at their employee addresses, 40%, over 40% of those employees were City of Dayton residents.
Okay.
So it is employment opportunities for our citizens. It is income tax that helps support services for our neighborhoods, and it is also about stability for Dayton International Airport, which as a small airport sits in a very competitive environment.
Okay. So when we talking about that situation, we talk about downtown and what happens with that. We talk about the arcade, for example, that was dormant for 30 years. And then because of a lot of things that we talked about, again, I'm trying to think back, 2014 maybe, a time frame, making decisions on warm, safe, and dry to keep it from falling apart, from falling down and deteriorating further, while we look for additional resources and investments. And I think we've had at least 60 different investors that sort of came together under your leadership. Thank you very much for that. Okay, to put the arcade in a space where it was also or has also become a generator for more and more dollars that flow into the city of Dayton. How much fun was that?
That was the best 3 years of my life, Mayor, that actually it was exciting, it was frustrating, it was concerning, it was terrifying at times, because it was a really big endeavor. And what I tell people, the biggest change about Dayton Arcade, first of all, there was great policy work done in the front of Dayton Arcade, which is, by the way, as you know, Mayor, the most beloved set of structures throughout this entire region. Nobody had a love or an affinity for a set of buildings stronger than that of the arcade. So the policy work that was done was amazing. We had a set of stakeholders and staff around a table. We got a demolition contractor who never saw anything they couldn't tear down. And we had a developer who came to the table with historic development who never saw a building they couldn't redevelop, right? And we basically set them loose on a variety of strategy, and which included partial demolition, total demolition, all different kinds of redevelopment scenarios. And what that did is inform a policy that we were able to bring to the city commission, that this building has good bone structure. This building, there's an opportunity, and we should secure it, keep it safe and dry, warm and dry, so that we can try and attract development. And the city commission supported that recommendation, gave $700,000 to button it up, dry it out, warm it up. And then we were very fortunate to find a developer that fell in love with this structure. And, that's when the fun really started, because, you take a deal like this, which, as you said, there were, with the first phase alone, almost 30 different funding partners, structures into this project. And the one thing that was very different from 30 years ago, while I would love to take credit for all of this, is our development toolbox had changed significantly. There were way more development tools and programs we could take advantage of to leverage our funding to fill the gap than there were 30 years ago. There was historic Federal historic tax credits. That's all you had. You had one tool. And there was no way it could have made up the gap that we had, or the public money that needed to be invested into this arcade project. So, and it was terrifying because there were many times where the structure, something would fall off that was a primary investor, and I thought, oh, here it is. This is it. This is what's going to kill our deal, right? Luckily, it didn't happen, and we were able to continue to see forward, and I was able to keep everyone pointed towards north, and, we had a great, celebration in April of 2019, and now everyone can see the results of a second phase, and it's just been amazing. But, your support on the commission as in the first phase and as the mayor in the second phase was obviously huge in us being able to move forward because, we put about $13 million of investment into this structure, but we leveraged, $200 million.
$20 million, really. So when people talk about, and we hear this often, and the response to the people who live in the neighborhoods, for example, especially a neighborhood that was denigrated on purpose. We started talking about the West Side, and looking at how these investments through downtown or other parts of the city, how they benefit actually every neighborhood. We talked about that, how they benefit every neighborhood. I make the connection a lot of times because the young people who are going through our school system, and they are prepared to, when they leave the school system, go into the military, go to college, or go into the workforce, or any one of those combinations that they want to use. So I talk about the aspect of if they're getting some of these $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 jobs without a college education, because many of them do not require that, they take those dollars where? If they go to school, they take those dollars right back to their community. And their community gets the benefit of the support that they bring back to either grandmother, grandfather, or mother and father, or they have a house that's been a part of the family in terms of generations, and so they're able to acquire that leadership and also acquire the responsibility of keeping the house or putting the house back in the shape that they would like for it to be in.
Yeah.
Thus, beautifying the neighborhood. And so when I see additionally individuals who live in those neighborhoods taking more and more pride by having more and more cleanups in their neighborhoods, picking up trash, and also talking about, why don't we just stop throwing trash down? Okay, because now my neighborhood is beautified now, so I'm not throwing trash down as often as maybe we used to. How it does, if we think about this big picture issue, how is it that we continue to move in the right direction as more and more citizens are satisfied? And of course, we always have those who are not. And for those who are saying, well, you haven't done enough yet. And I say to them, just hold on, we're on the way. But how do you look at the constant growth that we seem to have in Dayton because of the investments that have come from outside the city of Dayton, and citizens benefit from that?
Yeah. Well, I think it all goes back to, you have to be strategic, because we never have enough funding to, spread it like peanut butter and expect an impact, right? Yeah. And so,
especially evenly across
65 neighborhoods.
Yeah, across a piece of bread. So you know how hard it is to spread peanut butter.
That's right.
So good. Okay,
yeah.
Good.
So it is really important to be strategic, and sometimes that requires the governing body to make really tough decisions, because you can't say yes to everything. Again, you're trying to drive an impact. And so when we are, our asset development strategy, those are, 20 plus year plans. And I know sometimes that people are impatient. I am impatient, and they want to see the investments come tomorrow. But the fact of the matter is, attracting investment and development into your community requires consumer confidence, and it requires us to build momentum. Which is why in the Dayton Recovery Plan, when we had $138 million of money to invest, almost 90% of that funding went into our neighborhoods, particularly those neighborhoods. Again, this is the city trying to make up for some of the wrongs that happened in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s around investment policies that were racist and the redlining you talked about earlier. And we also looked at, because it was ARPA funding, it had to be of a health basis. We had to impact health. And so when we did our modeling and we took all of that information into together, that's how we identified the 4 to 6 target neighborhoods, which there is one in East Dayton and the rest are in West Dayton and Northwest Dayton, because it was about setting up and seeding. The $138 million wasn't going to be transformative. We were seeding transformational change by creating 4 to 6 epicenters throughout our city that we would serve as the, where we plant our stake or flag in the ground, and then where we would keep coming back year after year and building out, attracting investment and continuing to build that epicenter larger and larger, and thus getting the momentum you need to attract more.
Right. So I know time is up. And we didn't get through all of what we wanted to talk about. Okay.
I have one more thing I really have to say.
We'll do that, and then we'll talk about having. Let's come back and do part 2.
Okay. So
your last point.
In building that momentum. So if you recall, the commission approved the Dayton Recovery Plan at the end of 2021. We have been tracking investments from 2021, the beginning of 2021, through current date. And this is what I think is really exciting because of all of the work we've been doing for the last 25 years. We have hit a $2 billion investment since 2021 to 2025. $2 billion has been invested across the city. And not even a majority of that has been in downtown. I know you and I hear that all the time. Too much money being spent in downtown. About $750 million went into downtown, not from the city. The city, put in about $22 million over that time period, but it leveraged $750 million.
Correct.
Across the city, in the neighborhoods, $1.3 billion, $1.3 billion went into our neighborhoods, and particularly around housing investments and blight removal and roads and sidewalks and parks. And all of that money has also started attracting investment. As an example, we have built 1,800 plus new construction or infill housing units. We have repaired or rehabbed over 2,300 units for a total of over 4,100 units. And that investment has leveraged $760 million all by itself in the city of Dayton. I can't tell you the last time we've been able to point to a $767 million housing investment in the city of Dayton over a less than 5-year period of time. So there are great, great things happening and underway in the city of Dayton.
Okay. You've heard it. More and more great things happening, continue to happen, and we're going to continue to build on that as far as the city of Dayton is concerned. So, again, we had to call this to an end. We had to come back for part 2. Okay, with some more great information. So thank you for watching In the Spotlight with Mayor Jeff Mims, www.daytonknowhow.gov, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.